Hello, cadets. Welcome in. We are honored to have some very special guests with us today. We have Tom and Rich from the Fantasy Sanctuary. How you guys doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Great to be on with you guys. Always down for a bit of fantasy football talk.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you guys. If you don't know Rich and Tom, like these are two of my favorite fantasy football follows on X. Their YouTube page is phenomenal. They put out a bunch of really good content. Um, I'll give them a quick introduction. Rich, they're both very well established in all areas of fantasy football, but I like to call Rich like the dynasty guru. I love his content because he's not afraid to offer a unique perspective on rankings. He puts a ton of work into producing great content. One of the highlights that I got from him over the last year was his rookie draft guide. There's over 100 pages of really detailed content. I know he's working on a new one for 2024, so got to give kudos to him. He puts a lot of work in the output that he puts out there, and it's absolutely great analysis. And then not to be outdone is Tom, who, again, these guys are experts in a lot of different things, but I really have come to love Tom's content around DFS and daily lineups. This is a guy who puts his money where his mouth is, very respected in the industry, a beast in the fantasy landscape. And, I'll call it out. I appreciate some of the tweets that you've posted to kind of help the newbies in the daily drafts. Like I learned what the type of daily draft formats were. I learned what rake was from you so that I was, starting and building my wallet a little bit more slowly. You'd be really impressed, Tom. I turned my $5 into $13 this year with daily lineups, and we'll just see what happens with that next year.
Don't spend it all in
If
one
I had
place.
that kind of ROI, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm bragging about it, right? So make sure you give both these guys a follow on X. We've got their usernames on next to their cameras. So cool. Without further ado, we're going to do a 2024 redraft mock today in a PPR format. We're going to do the first 4 rounds and alternate picks. This is going to be a really useful exercise for who we should be tracking and thinking about a little bit differently this offseason, and to kind of get our minds out of what the 2023 rankings were and start wrapping our minds around what the 2024 landscape is going to look like. So before we kick off, I want to ask our guests a couple questions based on their expertise. Tom, like I said, I really think you're a guru when it comes to those daily lineups. And a lot of the things you talk about is like strength of schedule and a lot of those other factors that go into building a best ball in a daily lineup. How much of those factors weigh into your redraft strategy, if at all?
Yeah, plenty of it, really. I mean, for me, I'm very much a structural drafter, so it's like it's not just thinking, okay, what does taking this player, what am I hoping to get out of them? It's saying, okay, well, if I take this player here, what am I hoping to be doing in the next round, 3 rounds from now, and stuff? And it's going, how many weeks is this player going to give me really usable production? Obviously, if that's in the first round, you're looking for somebody who's going to be in your lineup every time. But by the time we get to like round 3, round four, if you're having to start speculating for ceiling outcomes, how much are we going, okay, well, I might have to still weigh in other factors and be able to say, okay, I might need to take an extra wide receiver if I'm going to take this wide receiver here because their ceiling is high, but their floor might be low. So, yeah, I definitely approach redraft with the same kind of mindset as best ball, the same kind of mindset as DFS in a lot of way. And ultimately, if you're not thinking mainly about ceiling, I think you're just doing more harm than good to your team.
Very interesting. I'm a guy who likes to typically draft with, like, to your point, target guys who almost with every pick through all my rounds, I have a feeling that they have a safe floor and that they could be a utilizable asset for me because I'm not chasing the best ball numbers in these redraft leagues. But I do like what you said there, just around how you're still being mindful of it. Maybe take a swing on a guy like George Pickens who has some upside, right? But you want to mitigate that risk in the next round. So love that. And then for Rich, I love this because I had this planned as a question and you kind of asked about it before we started recording. Rich is big into Dynasty, does a lot of deep dives on the rookie classes, and I imagine it's easy to get hyped up around those rookies. So like when you're doing redraft, are there guiding principles you abide by for rookies? Like for example, I don't care how good Bijan looks and what team he got drafted to, I'm not drafting him in the first round. Or is it kind of a case by case basis for you with those rookies?
I think I try to be very logical and try and view everything through that sort of lens. When it comes to redraft season, I've already had like 6-7 months of talking about rookies, so I'm almost slightly kind of turned off by them. And I find that when we get into redraft world, sort of the redraft drafters are suddenly just learning these names and getting super hyped and overdrafting. And for me, I tend to find that I end up drafting a very few rookies early in redraft leagues. I find myself, maybe because I'm slightly degenerate and going to obscene depths, that those later rounds in redraft and best ball leagues, I'm drafting a lot more rookies just because I'm chasing that upside. And I think that early day 3 running backs have got more upside than a third handcuff on a team and things like that. So early on, particularly this year, I think the running back class being what it is, I'm probably not touching any of those running backs in the first kind of 7, 8, 9, probably even 10 rounds of redraft, because I don't think they've got that floor that you can use. But yeah, when we get into those later rounds, I'll probably be taking some dart throws to chase some rookie ceilings.
Yeah, and when you say all that, I think a lot, like for some reason, a name that came to mind for me was like Rashee Rice, right? Like this guy was a dart at the end of drafts, but he was a second round pick, right? So there's this happy medium of like, maybe you don't reach on the Quentin Johnstons of the world who were a first round pick in the middle rounds, and you take a dart throw on a wide receiver who's a late second round pick who's going to go undrafted in most redraft leagues. So I like that strategy. So um, I won't steal any more of your guys' secret sauce, and we will get the draft started. So we talked about it. I'm going to have the first pick because I want to plant my flag. And I mentioned this on a recent video we made about misleading stats. And I think this is a guy who no one's going to pick as the 101. And so I'm going to do it. And I'm going to just quickly explain why I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Justin Jefferson with the first pick in the draft. There's some quarterback uncertainty, so that could certainly sway this pick. But assuming he's got either Nick Mullins slinging it to him or Kirk Cousins, like this guy on a per game basis, if you remove the games he left early due to injury, had the highest fantasy points per game in the league. When he was playing and he was fully healthy, an absolute beast. I think you can get him at a discount. He probably is not going to go at the 101 in any leagues next year, maybe a few, but he did produce like a 101 when he was healthy. Over 1,000 yards this season. Missed a long stretch of the season due to that hamstring injury, but just an absolute beast and a guy that I think I would double down on, and I would pick it again. I think the logic was good to take him as the 101 this year, and I think when he was healthy, he played like it. So, yeah, that's my pick. Who wants to go second?
I'll tell you what, I'll fire off second pick. And I'm only want to be the second pick because I had a ton of Christian McCaffrey this year. And I don't know if you know, Christian McCaffrey pretty much equaled championships. I believe I had a stat that read off people that won championships, 50% of them had Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going Christian McCaffrey, the 102. Listen, he's a running back. Not many of them are going to be going in the first round in 2024. He's an absolute outlier. I know maybe people might be concerned that the decline in age. I'm really not concerned. This guy can catch the ball. He can find the end zone. He's an easy pick here for me. So Christian McCaffrey, the 102. Let's lock it in.
Well, I'll jump in and take the third pick because I know if I don't, then I know Rich will do it, and I know exactly who he'd take, and I'm going to take CD Lamb. What we saw from what we saw from him, particularly post the Week 7 bye week with the Cowboys, they just turned it over. They knew that they had to suddenly just feed him the ball so much heavier. He had 10.5 targets per game, a target share of 29%, and he was just utterly dominant. I think we really saw a true breakout, and I have more comfort taking him amongst the top wide receivers than anyone not named Justin Jefferson. I think Tyreek Hill, we would expect Jalen Waddle to be a bit healthier next year. Jamar Chase, I don't know. I just think that Bengals situation is a little up in the air. So yeah, for me, it's easily CeeDee Lamb at 103.
Yeah.
Well, I'm annoyed because I sat here thinking there's a clear tier of 3 at the top, and of course I'm the one that sits there quietly and ends up with the 4th pick. But yeah, I love those first 3. I think to me those are a clear tier. But at 4, I think you've got to chase the ceiling outcome. And I know what Tom's saying about Jaylen Waddle potentially being healthier this year. Let's not forget Tyreek Hill was phenomenal until the point that he started getting nicked up. So let's hope that Tyreek Hill can continue to defy age and continue to produce. So I'll grab him here at the 104. Are we snaking? Am I going again?
We could snake if you want. Let's snake. I like that idea.
Beautiful. Well, I'll go at the 105. I'll double tap the wide receiver position. I've got Amon St. Brown. I think.
Ooh, okay.
I have question marks because I think Ben Johnson's gone, but I think that he has got such bankable floor, and I think this offense could take another step forward potentially next year with Jared Goff, and adding more weapons could continue to open up space for Amon St. Brown.
That's pretty interesting that you went Brown with Chase on the board. I mean, I love the floor that he has. I think he's an absolute superstar. He definitely goes under the radar as a fantasy stud, but that's pretty interesting.
It's cool to just see how he's continued to shoot up the charts, right? Like year after year, that ADP has increased, and he has continually been more productive too. So I love the pick.
Yeah, I would have gone him on Ross St. Brown if it had fallen to me because he's just,
You would have taken him?
I would have taken him, yeah, because he's also almost always a lock for like 100-yard game, or he's like 10 targets in PPR formats. He just gets there so consistently. But yeah, I think I'm playing this as if T Higgins sticks around with the Bengals, so I'm going to fade Jamar Chase just a little bit further, and I'm going to pick the second running back. It is Breece Hall. His 93 targets this year were the most among all running backs, and I think you look at what that Jets offense had to go through, and then you go, okay, well, even if Aaron Rodgers isn't particularly good next year, he's still going to be better than what they got this year. And he loved dumping the ball off to Aaron Jones or any running back in Green Bay. It feels impossible for me to not see an absolutely nuclear year from Breece Hall, a year further removed from his ACL injury.
Yeah, I love the pick. John was wild and said that Breece was going to finish as the RB1 in 2023, coming off the ACL tear. We damn near laughed him out of the building, and this guy just produced and had a fantastic year. Looked amazing doing it. You could see him getting healthier. We all know the second year off the ACL, it's like even more explosiveness. So I think that's actually a really good value. He's just, I think he could have a McCaffrey like year next year. So love that pick. John, I think you're up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Hall, and that offense is going to be way better next year with Rodgers. The next pick I am going to pick, I'm going to take Chase here. Listen, I know we're concerned possibly about Chase when it comes to T. Higgins being there. Chase has performed with T. Higgins in the building, or he's not. So Chase here at the 107, I think that's an absolute steal. There's so many studs on the board. It's hard to argue against like Hill and St. Brown and Lamb going before him, but I'll take Chase at the 107. He's going to be tied to Burrow probably for his entirety of his career. So let's move on. 108?
Yeah, I'm at the 108, and this is starting to get tough for me because you're like, damn, Puka really is that good, isn't he? Like, you start thinking about him, and this, I don't think that's who I'd go for. I think this is a rough one, but again, this is a guy who had probably a rougher year and maybe a bit of a discount here. I'm ready to get hurt again, baby. I'm going Bijan
Oh
Robinson.
man.
I am so excited to see anybody else but Arthur Smith running that team. There's just part of me that hopes that it's like Vrabel or Pierce, and they're just going to turn around and hand him the ball 25 times a game. So I think you start to look at like Kyron Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs as the next running backs after him. And personally, like I like those running backs that have a little bit more of that bell cow build to them. So if I was doing a hero RB, I would want Bijan, and I'm willing to take another chance on him. He slightly disappointed last year, but I think the skill is just it's there. He looked really good on tape. He just was not utilized properly.
2 goal line carries all year.
Ridiculous. Now, who are we at? Is that
That's you again.
It's you. We're snaking around.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right, then let's do it. The guy who I just brought up, who I was on the fence about, I'm rolling with Puka, baby. I mean,
Oh boy.
this guy has earned my heart. I'll say it. Like, I wanted to fade him, but he's just clearly very, very talented. He passes the eye test, great route runner, very physical. I think Stafford will continue to target him, and he clearly just earned that alpha rollover cup at the end of the season.
If you'd have told me in 2023 we would be drafting Puka in the first round in 2024, I would not have believed you. So here we are. Who's up next?
That's back to you.
Oh, it's back to me.
Dude, I'm so bad with snake drafts. I'm like,
Yeah, we should have put the claims on so we would have known. I'm gonna go with Jonathan Taylor here. I think the talent's here. He's got the contract. He's going to be locked into this offense. He was a little banged up this year, but the games that he did play, he did produce in. I'm not really worried about Zach Moss too much. Again, he's got the contract. He should be getting the volume. So Jonathan Taylor at the 110.
Yeah, I like that. I think particularly when you plug Anthony Richardson back into this offense, it's going to just open up so many running lanes for Jonathan Taylor. I mean, what he's going to lose possibly in the passing game, he's probably going to make up for inefficiency. And yeah, I definitely think that Jonathan Taylor can maybe not quite hit the ceilings we saw a few years ago, but get close to it. I am going to take Kyron Williams here. I think I get what you're saying, Jonny, about you want running backs for that more kind of bell cow workload, but Kyron Williams led all running backs in snap share at 82%. He was fourth among all running backs with opportunity share at 74%. And I know people are kind of worried about is he going to end up getting James Robinson or something or Michael Carter? But those were less stable organizations, should we say? The Rams, Les Snead, Sean McVay aren't going anywhere. We really seemed to love Kyron Williams coming into the season in 2022, and then he got injured on the opening kickoff. And then this year, they just kept him under wraps all through training camp, and then would just end off Cam Akers and let it ride. And I really think that Kyron Williams is going to be very productive again next year.
Yeah, I love that pick. I think, led the league in running back rushing success rate, which, speaks for itself. I think he's a phenomenal back. Yes, he doesn't have that top end speed, but okay, he's not going to score you many 40-yard touchdowns, but he's going to score you plenty of points in other ways. So I'm going to continue my run of just sticking with the wide receivers as Tom keeps sniping everyone that I want, but I'm going to go Garrett Wilson. I think that, this is a point in the draft where he was going last year. He's had another fantastic season with horrendous quarterback play, horrendous coaching, horrendous offensive line. Hopefully, with improved 2 out of 3 of those, he can come back and have a truly superstar season. And I think he's got the potential to ascend into that CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson tier over the next 12 months, definitely. And then with my other pick, I'm going to go AJ Brown. I think that okay, he didn't have the end to the season that we all hoped. I think there's, plenty of people in Philadelphia that are scared and, crying out and panicking right now. But I think if we reordered the season so that he finished with how he was producing in the middle of the season, I think AJ Brown could be in the conversation for the 101 right now. I think that middle of the season was absolutely phenomenal. I think with an entire offseason, I think the Eagles are probably going to stay with Sirianni and Brian Johnson. I think that they'll realise that for this offense to hit that ceiling, it needs to run through AJ Brown, and I think he could be an absolute steal at this price.
Well said. AJ Brown, whether he's going to be in Philadelphia or not, he's still going to produce wherever he goes. But I still think he still sticks around. He's got a good relationship with Jaylen Herz, so maybe he's just a little angry about how their season turned it out.
So is that back to me now?
I believe so.
So I'm going to take someone who me and Rich have gone back and forth about at times this year over on some of our videos and in our Fantasy Sanctuary Discord. I'm going with Deebo Samuel. He didn't necessarily have an utterly insane year, but there were just so many ceiling weeks that he gave. Like, he was just a real difference maker over a period. Yes, he finished just behind George Kittle in targets, finished like 13 behind Brandon Ayuk. But when he's on the field, he's so often the first read, and the way that Deebo Samuel gets there just absolutely blows the doors off. Like, Brandon Ayuk has good weeks, but he fails to get in the end zone, whereas Deebo Samuel scores rushing touchdowns, scores receiving touchdowns, gets in the end zone non-stop. And yeah, I'm completely comfortable taking Deebo Samuel midway through the second.
Okay, fair enough. With my two... What's that?
Juicy. I mean, this is a pretty juicy little regraph we've got going on here.
I'd say so. And listen, Deebo's got his manufactured touches. He's going to be getting the ball. They're giving him in the rushing game and pretty much anywhere. Brock Purdy loves him. With the 205, I think. Listen, I wasn't too high about this guy when he got drafted, but I'm going to go Jahmyr Gibbs here. He's phenomenal as a explosive player, and I'm not really too concerned if David Montgomery is going to be there or not. I mean, he was there this year, and he still got some touches down the stretch. He started a little slow, and that was concerning, but Jahmyr Gibbs he's got upside to him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was a top 5 running back in 2024.
Yeah, I like that pick. I think he had to get picked, right? So now I'm on the board. This is pretty easy for me just because this guy has paid bills for me and helped me feed my family.
Oh my God.
And that is my guy Davante Adams. I don't think he's not the type of guy who ever had breakaway speed. So he's just a very brilliant route runner, has continued to be successful with mid-grade quarterback play. I don't care who's throwing him the ball next year. He's a lock to produce. Yeah, that's my guy. For the next pick, this one gets really tricky for me. I'm going to just kind of go with consensus here. They have him, a lot of the rankings that I've been looking at have this guy's a top 10 pick. I think it's a bit of a reach, but I think this is probably closer to the area he deserves to be in. That's DJ Moore. There were so many stats you put together that showed that he should not have been productive as he was. Like, coming to Chicago is like, well, they just don't throw that much. And in order for him to have a top 5 finish, like, all these things would just have to astronomically change upside down, which have never happened in NFL history. And he did. He had an awesome year. I don't know if Fields is going to be throwing it to him, and I'm probably pretty happy if he's not. So if they take Caleb Williams, I see that as an upgrade. I think DJ Moore is really flashed and put it all together this year. I've always been a fan of the talent. Another thing I really like about him is his toughness. He plays through big hits. He is on the field. The best ability is availability for me when I'm building a team. So I really like the guy. There's some risk with this pick, but I'm willing to take it.
Fair enough. I'm back on the clock, correct? We're going around?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. This one's a little tough for me because I do see a little decline, but I will go with consensus as well. I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs. I'm going to hope the Bills go on a nice little Super Bowl run. Josh Allen makes Diggs very happy. They can all share hands and sing Kumbaya, and Diggs comes back to Buffalo, and he's tied to Josh Allen for one more year. I still think he's got one more year of elite production before we see that drop off in age. So, Diggs, stick around in Buffalo, please. It'd be phenomenal to see one more year with him and Josh Allen.
So I'm going to go with a player who's probably going to be quite divisive, I think, for a lot of people. But I'm going to go with Michael Pittman, who had 150 targets, 30% target share, 18 red zone targets. And he was just a complete volume hog. And I know people will be like, oh, well, is he going to see that kind of projected volume with Anthony Richardson? He was still averaging 8.75 targets per game with Richardson. When Richardson's in there, it's more just the type of targets change because they do so many run-pass options where he's the first read on them. So if Michael Pittman sticks in Indy and if he's the wide receiver one without incredible competition next to him, I'd feel quite comfortable in full PPR taking him here.
I got a story for you guys. I traded Michael Pittman before the start of the season, straight up, in Dynasty, for Calvin Ridley because I was chasing upside. And boy, oh boy, was that probably the worst trade I ever did. Granted, I won a championship. The trophy's behind me. But I wish I didn't do that trade. I really, really wish I just stuck to my gut, but it happened.
This is why I always say make trades and then forget them because you only remember the bad ones.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Chris Olave here. I think that you look at his advanced numbers from his rookie season; they were absolutely phenomenal. Some of the best we've ever seen from a rookie. He had a good year this last year. I think slightly disappointing as a whole, but I think that a lot of that is this offense didn't really get clicking. I think Derek Carr took a while to get settled. We then had injuries. We had Jameson. We had Taysom Hill playing. We're going to get a new offensive coordinator. We know Pete Carmichael's been sacked. I think that, this is a guy that saw 140 targets this year with having missed a game. I think his potential outcome is, we're talking 160, 170 targets as a realistic outcome. He could be an absolute monster for fantasy next season. And I think that another off-season playing with Derek Carr under his belt, a new, hopefully slightly more inventive play caller. Realistically, this core in New Orleans, this is going to be their last go around. I think, the Bills going to come due. They keep pushing cap numbers down the road. That defense is about to age out. I think this is going to be their last roll of the dice and their last big swing. And I think that Chris Olave is going to be a big part of that. So I'm very excited for him in 2024. And then the second pick, so coming back around, I'm going to take the first quarterback off the board. I'm not normally an early quarterback drafter, but I think the third round to get Josh Allen, I feel like the value's too good to pass up here. I feel like realistically he should probably be a second round pick. So I'm happy to take him in the third. And yeah, it's not a move that I normally like, but the positional value, the points over replacement, I think you're getting from him too good to pass up right here.
Yeah, and I would have taken Josh Allen there as well. Like I was starting to write up this weekend's DFS previews earlier today, and one stat just kind of jumps out the page for him. Like, he scored over 20 fantasy points in 35 of the last 43 games he's played. It's absurd what he does. And the fact this year the Bills started running the tush push and now he's got 15 rushing touchdowns. That's just not a number which you expect to see from a quarterback. I do think obviously that might regress slightly next year, but I would expect the Bills' pass offense to be slightly better than it was down the stretch as well. I'm going to go... It definitely feels like this is where it's tricky. There's a lot of ambiguity around this area of the draft. There's a lot of players who, end up changing circumstances, and by the time September rolls around, the draft board might look quite different. But I'm going to take another player that gives us some kind of positional value, and I'm going to take Sam Laporta. I think what he did as a tight end in his rookie season was just utterly absurd. We haven't seen a rookie season like that virtually ever. And Yes, there's a chance that he regresses in touchdowns because he led the position very easily. I think he ended up with 9 touchdowns. But the volume feels sticky. The way that the Lions use him, they use him similar to how the Dolphins use Tyreek Hill at times. They put him into like a speed motion and they get him those kind of free releases at the line of scrimmage. Those kind of play designs aren't going to disappear if Ben Johnson leaves the Lions, I don't think. And yeah, I just feel very comfortable that if Sam Laporta drops any production from touchdowns, he'll make up for it in terms of yards and receptions.
I like that. First tight end off the board, Sam Laporta. That's pretty interesting considering he was a rookie.
I love the Tyreek Hill comp. I'm stealing that. I'm gonna nick the cheetah in my dynasty.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna follow you in the tight end landscape here, and I'm gonna go with the old vet, Travis Kelce. Maybe this is just the chief. This is just the chief fan in me. Maybe I'm just delusional. I know there's definitely concerns about declined, and he had a couple drops this year. He didn't really find the end zone as much as he probably should have. Mahomes was probably a little off himself, but again, it's Travis Kelce. He is going to be a PPR stud. He's tied to the best quarterback in the league. I think there's some positive regression in 2024. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Travis Kelce here.
Kelce getting picked at all is spicy. I mean, that guy is cooked. I'm just kidding.
He's got it, man. He's got it. He's got it. Leave him alone. All right. He had a down year. It happens. He can't be the tight end one every year.
It could definitely change if he has a gangbusters finish in the playoffs and they do what they did and win the Super Bowl again, and he's a key cog. There's no way he slips, outside of the first 3 rounds. But for me, I'm super psyched you didn't snipe this guy. I am taking Travis Etienne Jr. I'm an Etienne truther. You found me. I've been in hiding, but I can't hide anymore. Crazy inefficient this year, but the dude is historically efficient. Like, if you watch the games, and I did, my family's a big Jacksonville fan. They didn't have good run blocking, and he didn't have a lot of yards before contact. And again, this is a guy who's historically been an explosive runner, chunk play kind of guy. When he gets an inch of daylight, he can take it to the house. Plays at just a different gear than everyone else. Had a top 5 RB finish this year, and I think if anything improves with their offensive line, it's only uphill for him. And there's no competition. Like, I laughed when people said Tank Bigsby was going to steal it. I really did. I laughed at them and got into kind of like an argument because I was like, I just don't see it. Like, Etienne is one of the best college running backs of all time. And it's kind of shown that explosiveness at this next level. And if you think Etienne was inefficient, I think it's like 3.7 yards a carry. Go look at Tank Bigsby's 2.56 yards per carry. This was a bad offensive line. Do not blame Etienne too much on the struggles that he had with efficiency. Take another chance on this guy. Trevor Lawrence loves him. They went to college together. I'm in on him for another year.
I'll tell you what.
For me, the thing I struggle with Etienne is that, like, 2 years in a row, he's just completely faded down the stretch. Like, we saw it the year where they got rid of James Robinson. Then he failed to score any touchdowns, and it was kind of like, it's almost there. And then last year, it was the same. It was like, there were spells where he was great, and obviously he stayed healthy, so he ended up in total points quite up there. But there were a lot of pretty meh weeks, for like the kind of weeks that you don't look at your lineup and go, okay, that's killing me having that player start. But they're not winning you any weeks, and at a certain point, it's like that kind of opportunity cost. And I always really struggle with Travis Etienne because of that.
Yeah. Like I said, as a Jags fan, it was a tough
100%.
season to watch because, like, people would have easily picked us to win the division, and then, it just all crumbled. I had him in a couple leagues. I was high on him last year, and yeah, those 8-point weeks, they didn't lose me the weeks, but they certainly didn't make me happy. But I think he had a 2-touchdown game in the fantasy playoffs. Nice, like 60-yard run he broke. And that was the first time all year I saw him with an inch of daylight. And I mean, if you look at the highlight for that run, it's very good. Like he's navigating tight lanes, he's staying on his feet through contact. Like I
Yeah,
just
I
I'm a
mean,
guy who believes in the talent. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean that came against it was the running back gift against the Panthers, isn't it? Like the
Yeah.
Panthers led the league in like rushing touchdowns allowed for position with like 1.4. No other defense allowed over 1.0. So yeah, you'd really hope in those positions he would perform, but it's like the week before 6 points, the week before 9.9 points. So you needed a good roster to get to the fantasy finals with Etienne on your team.
I was ready to bench him that week. I really, really was. I think I had Kamara, and at the last second, for some reason, I'm like, this matchup is too good. Tom would probably tell me to think about it on a week-to-week basis a little bit more. And I ended up pulling Kamara. He ended up twisting his ankle, so that it was kind of some luck in there. But with a good game from ETN, I was happy. So now I'm back on the board. I'm probably, boy, this is tough. I see a bell cow running back, and I see a really good wide receiver. Just for the discourse, let's do it. I'm going to take Brandon Ayuk. I think it's wild you pick Deebo above him, right? Like this is kind of their alpha wide receiver. I totally agree about how the usage of Deebo and him getting those first reads, but like this guy put it all together this year, right? He was wide open all the time, good after the catch, strong hands. I just wish they would have schemed him up even more. To your point, maybe design the offense for him to be the first look a little more. I think he's a player who's going to continue to get better. And I do think you can take both of those wide receivers, Deebo and McCaffrey and Ayuk, in the first 3 rounds. And nobody's losing because it's the best offense in football. So,
I
Yeah,
have
I mean, I absolutely love Brandon Ayuk, and I think he's an incredible player. But like this year, 7 games under 60 yards, 9 games without a touchdown. I think sometimes it's there's a little bit of wish casting of okay, he's fantastic at what he does when he gets the ball, but perhaps it was just this year with Christian McCaffrey's like near MVP form, making it difficult for him to really be a true fantasy stud. But that's just why I lean to Debo because for me, he's a more reliable touchdown scorer.
I
I
have
think with
Deebo
Ayuk,
one.
if he's in,
Go ahead. Go
sorry,
ahead.
go on.
No, you're good. Go for
I was
it.
gonna say, I think if Ayuk's in pretty much 31 other offenses, he's probably a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. I think the
100%.
problem is that the way this offense is structured with manufactured touches for Deebo, we know that Christian McCaffrey is going to get his. Brandon Ayuk can't get the volume to sustain what we expect his fantasy production to be. And I think when the volume is there, he looks phenomenal. And he is absolutely a top 10 wide receiver in terms of talent, in terms of how he plays. But I just think within this offense, there's almost too many mouths to feed. And despite his talent, he just falls down that pecking order so that he comes third.
Yeah, I mean, he only had 7 red zone targets all year, which
wow.
you look at the list of players who had more than that. You know, Michael Thomas had more than that and barely played all season. Jaron Johnson had 7 and
Wow.
didn't play for large chunks. Kendrick Bourne had 6 red zone targets and was out for a big chunk of the season. So it's like if he was getting those looks as well, then I think that's what it's going to take for him to really ascend to the next tier for me.
Yeah, I will admit he was a lot more fun to pick in the 6th round this year, wasn't he? Okay, I love it. I love, Tom, some of the data you're bringing to the table. Who do we got next?
I think I'm up,
You're up. Yeah.
right? So I'm gonna go with here. This name's kind of hard to put in here, but I'm gonna go with Saquon Barkley, just because of the name and the age. I think wherever he goes, he's not gonna be a giant, but wherever he goes, he's going to have a starting gig somewhere, and hopefully it's a good landing spot. But talent alone, he's still pretty young. He's got, I think, 2 more years of solid production ahead of him. And listen, that Giants offense was an absolute shambles this year across the board. 3 different quarterbacks. The line was atrocious. There was absolutely nothing. And I think the strength of schedule for Barkley as well didn't really help him going against the Eagles and Cowboys twice the year. So I think there's some bounce back years ahead of him. 2024 should be, I mean, let's say he goes anywhere else other than the Giants. I think it's an upgrade. So let me get Saquon here. And honestly and truthfully, in 2024, I truthfully, he'd probably go in the second round just because of name value. So let me get Barkley right here.
I do think it's wild he slipped this far, right? And this is kind of where he is at on some of the early consensus for 2024. Tom, I think of you when I think of that NFC East, because as John just brought up, like, I'm fading running backs who are in that division because last year Washington kind of fell apart, but like they had a stout offensive line. The Eagles are a tough run defense, right? The Cowboys are a tough run defense. So some of that's like, man, I love Barkley as a player, but you're playing 6 games against some tough sledding, guaranteed, right? So, just something.
I think Barkley's one of those players that's kind of frustrating in redraft because his range of outcomes are massive. We saw games with Tommy DeVito where Saquon was barely being involved in the passing game, and then we saw games when Tyrod was there where he was dumping off. We know that Daniel Jones is a bit more, he will check down, and that's okay. But I'm not sure it really makes sense for the Giants to bring Saquon Barkley back. They have
gone.
Yeah, there's so many issues on that team, and to continue investing a lot of money into Saquon Barkley, when you look around the league and you see what teams are getting from rookies, from players like Kyron Williams, or from a player who I'm going to pick here, Rachaad White, who's a rookie who is coming in and being very effective. Like, I don't think the Giants can justify it, particularly when they have so many issues across the board. But yeah, I like Rachaad White, and I would take Rachaad White straight up probably about 4 or 5 picks earlier. I think he's kind of that round 3, round 2 turn for me this year. His 66 targets is just such a reliable floor for PPR games. But what we saw this year was so much more of a better efficiency in the run game, because last year he was just truly dreadful in the run game, like easily one of the most inefficient running backs in the league. And then this year you looked at it and it's like, oh, actually he's popping up for like 75-yard games, 100-yard games, rushing for over 4 yards per carry at points, even in fairly tough matchups. And now that he's starting to put it all together, Rachaad White for me is one of these players that I'll be taking dart throws on in best ball with the hope in those builds that he can turn in a real legendary running back season and just put it all together, because he's got next to no competition in the passing game when it comes to running back position. If Mike Evans isn't in Tampa Bay next year, that's really going to open up even more work. And then the running game, if he started to show that he can actually be useful and rush well, then I've got every bit of faith in him that he could be very good next year and potentially be like, top 5 running back.
You said it.
I'm gonna jump in on that and basically go the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I'm gonna go for the old guy. I'm gonna go Keenan Allen. I think that at this point, yes, he's getting up there in age. Yes, it's a new head coach, probably a new play caller, but we know the connections there. This is a guy that averaged 21.5 points per game this year. Like, his production was wild. He isn't a guy that has ever been high on the athleticism spectrum. I think he ran a 4.7 40. He's a guy that wins with nous. He wins with incredible route running ability, and that's not going anywhere. And quite frankly, if he regresses 4-5 points a game and is still giving me 15-16 points a game at this point in the draft, I'm delighted with that. So yeah, I think he's got at least one really good fantasy season left in him. And I think that if we're going to get Harbaugh in Los Angeles, I think that offense could be absolutely fascinating this year. And then I'm up again, so on the turn, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to stick with the wide receiver well. I'm going to go Nico Collins. I think that the hype is getting a little bit mad in dynasty circles right now, but at the end of the third round, this feels like good value. This is a guy that had the same amount of production in terms of points per game this year as Stefon Diggs. He's in an ascending offense. We know that CJ Stroud is taking a step forwards, and yet I'm getting him a full round after Stefon Diggs. I think there is still a step forward to take. I think his route running has improved throughout the season, and I think that he is going to be a more well-rounded wide receiver. I'm absolutely terrified if Bobby Slowick is going to get a head coaching job, and potentially Nico Collins could be out of a job. I could see less production on that side of things, but let's hope Bobby Slowick stays around and this Houston offense can take a big step forward next year again.
So I'm going to take the next quarterback off the board, and it is my guy, Lamar Jackson. I think, well, I let him stay on the board this long, but you look at the Ravens, particularly as the season went on, he became more and more comfortable in this Todd Monken offense, and we saw the growth of Zay Flowers. We saw, Isaiah Likely becoming a bigger threat. And all the while, he's still been averaging 51 rushing yards per game. What Jackson brings to the ground is just such a safe floor. But his ceiling outcomes are also incredible. This year, he had games of 28.2 points, 28.1, 33.9, 31.6, 36.3 in championship weekends. There are very few quarterbacks who can do that. And yes, there are going to be weeks where you get Gus Edwards going in for 2 touchdowns, and it just sucks all the fantasy value away from Lamar Jackson. But over the course of the season, I think it's always going to balance out in his favor. And next year, I'd expect Zay Flowers to take another step forward as well, and for this offense to keep on cooking.
Well said. I can't believe how good this offense is running. I had questions coming into the season with it being a little more pass heavy, but listen, it's been a good show, and Lamar Jackson has been really good down the stretch. So I'm actually going to follow your lead here. And when we're talking about quarterbacks and we're talking about running quarterbacks, I'm going to go with Jaylen Herz that just got ran out of the building by the Bucks. They actually didn't get that tush push on that 2-point conversion, which was very surprising. Now, me and Jonny were just talking about this the other day about possibly that play being banned. There are some rumors about that happening. Listen, if that play does end up being banned, there's probably no world where Jaylen Herz sees 15 touchdowns next year. And listen, and Kelce retiring as well, so he's a big cog on that play. But this guy still does find the end zone with his legs. He could possibly see 8 to 10 touchdowns, even if that play does get banned. But if it doesn't, well, you just got an absolute steal at the top of the 4th round with Jaylen Herz, because he's going to find the end zone consistently with his legs. So Jaylen Herz off the board at the 401.
Yeah, he was pretty consistently the QB2 in 2023 redraft. I did not like what I saw on film this year, but I didn't like some of what I saw from Josh Allen either. But that guy scores points, and that's the name of the game at the end of the day. Both of those guys can get it done from a fantasy perspective in ugly ways. We're going to get really spicy with these next 2 picks, guys. So I got to do it. I got to take my boy, the pride of Colorado State, Trey McBride, baby. We're going T-Mac.
Oh, man.
He's just a solid player. I think he saw that. He really came on in the second half of the year. I'm more up in the air on, should this guy be the the number 1 tight end in Dynasty? I think if he would have had 9 touchdowns, it's just a massively different conversation, right? And Kyler Murray is one of those quarterbacks you can tell just likes throwing to his tight end, kind of like Dak Prescott. So I think that's a good pick. It's a little bit of a reach for where he's going on the early ADPs, but I think this is probably what is closer to realistic. He is potential to be a difference maker.
I love it here. I think that people look at season-long numbers and think that Trey McBride was miles behind Sam Laporta. If you look at it from the moment Zach Ertz got injured and went on IR, Trey McBride averaged 0.1 points less than Sam Laporta. And yet we're talking about a guy that is due massive regression on the positive side for touchdowns in Trey McBride, and a guy that's probably going to see negative regression on the touchdown side in Sam Laporta. Yet they had almost the exact same production. So I think, if you're getting around value from where Sam Laporta was drafted for where Trey McBride's going right now, plus we're expecting, a healthier Kyler Murray with another year under his belt, post ACL, potentially another superstar wide receiver in this offense to help take some coverage away. I think Trey McBride at tight end 3 in the 4th round is really good value for me.
Yeah. I mean, this guy won the John Mackey Award, right? The best tight end in the country 2 years ago, coming out of CSU. That's why I said that. He was like their entire team. And I just don't think maybe people recognize the pedigree that he has. So with my next pick, again, I'm going to keep it spicy because I'm loving these kind of deeper dives that maybe are getting overlooked. And that's Tank Dell. So, I mean, no one can argue that the dude was a stud. He is an amazing route runner. The one thing I'd call out is just like Nico Collins is at the peak of ballin'. That's my little nickname for Nico right now with no Tank Dell, right? Like this wave of Nico hype is awesome. And he is incredibly talented. Like I love what I'm seeing on film from Nico Collins. But when they were both on the field, it really felt like a 1A, 1B, and almost like Dell was emerging as the 1A because he was a rookie and they had to kind of ease him into action. And he's quickly demanding targets and being monstrously productive. There's this injury here. You got to see him come back from it and be fully healthy. But if that wouldn't have happened, I don't know if we're not like flip-flopping Tank Dell and Collins in terms of ADP. Both of them, total studs. I want either of them on my team. Especially with Stroud throwing to them. But again, I would not fade Tank Dell too much based on, what happened to him at the end of this year. I would look at how he was coming on midway through the season. He was becoming a set it and forget it player every week. So.
Okay. Who's up next? It's me. Okay. I'm going to go with, right now, I'm going to go with Ken Walker. Now, first off, I think there was major concerns about how this backfield would really shake out when Sharp was drafted to Seattle. Wasn't exactly the premier destination for him, but listen, Ken Walker, when he was on the field, it was his backfield. This guy's talented. I believe he went in the 2nd round of drafts in last year, so he's kind of fallen a little bit. So I like him as a nice value in the 4th round. And if we can possibly see some, him stay a little healthier, we can definitely see him being a top 10 running back in 2024. So I'm going to take Ken Walker here.
So I'm going to take Mike Evans because it just feels a bit wrong to leave him still on the board after the season that he's had. Even, Tampa would be crazy if they don't try to keep him. I know it got a little bit hairy between the two sides, like when we were talking about his contract, but what he did this year was fantastic. 24% target share, 7.9 targets per game. And the value of his targets is so high because they're downfield. When Mike Evans catches a target, you open up the app and all of a sudden you've gone from being 4 points behind somebody to like 3 points ahead of somebody in your matchup. So I really like Mike Evans. I think that he's not really showing any visible signs of decline. I think that Baker Mayfield's going to be back in Tampa next year, and I feel like as long as they keep him there, that everything will be fine. And even if he moved on, how many situations are going to be perceived worse from what we expected for Mike Evans this year?
Very true.
I'm glad you've taken Mike Evans, Tom, because I was looking at it and I feel like for the brand, I can't be seen to be taking Mike Evans. But I'm gonna head down south, stay in Florida, and go and grab Devon Achane here. I think that at this point in the draft, I'm swinging for upside. We saw it in the middle half of this year. Yes, there are some serious concerns about the offensive line, whether they're going to have to change everything this offseason, what this offense is going to look like. But we know that the running game is going to be phenomenal. I think that Raheem Mostert will be back. He's under contract, but I think that we're going to start to see more of this backfield shift towards Achane. And I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that can carry 20, 25 touches a game, but maybe if he can, get 15, he can be a fantasy superstar. So I'm happy to go here. And then I'm pretty sure this is my last pick, so I feel like I've got to do it, but I'm going to go Marvin Harrison Jr. here.
Nice.
I have no idea where he's going in ADP and early ADP, but I just think this is the best wide receiver prospect I've watched on film in the last 12 years. I think there's not many guys that are 6'4", 220 pounds that move the way he does, that have the nuanced route running he does, that have the hands he does. So I think he is going to be a fantasy relevant player the second he walks on the field, wherever it is. And I think anytime a player is drafted in the probably top 5 picks in the NFL draft, that a team's going to use him immediately.
Just for,
I love it.
I'm going to put Mims, guys, for Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, do Marvin Mims, because we don't have Marvin Harrison in Sleeper yet.
Sleeper's on it, guys. Just so if you're looking at this video, Marvin Mims did not go in the 4th round.
Yeah. I love it. I think you had to state your claim. So I'm glad you did. And I honestly was thinking, this was half the reason I wanted to do this was to see where Devon Achane landed, because I think we could have been talking about him in the early second.
Yeah, I agree.
If we were all smoking crack, but I'm glad none of my friends are doing that.
Tom and I had a conversation in the middle of last year when he was in his run of obscene production, talking about how high he was going to go. And the conversation we were having was, at that point, he was a first-round pick, absolutely. Now, obviously, he dropped away as the season went on and, wasn't holding the obscene levels of efficiency on a reduced number of touches. But, yeah, I think if you're looking for ceiling outcomes, there's only a handful of guys that got a higher ceiling than Achane.
Yeah, and so much of it, is weighing how much of a landing spot matters, because we've talked about in our Discord this week about how it doesn't really have the biggest impact for Dynasty. People faded Marquise Brown for years, and then he had some nice seasons with the Ravens. People faded, Garrett Wilson at times because he was with Zach Wilson, and then he goes out and he just earns targets in such a way. If Marvin Harrison ended up with the Patriots and we're still looking at Mac Jones or something like that, there is an element of going, okay, well, his ceiling is still capped, but what he's going to bring to the table is likely enough to overcome it. I think round 3 ultimately will be where he settles in. I think it'll be that kind of area. The area where in previous years we've seen sort of T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith going. I think it's that kind of point where you get past the wide receiver 1s and you start looking at, okay, well, these players are wide receiver 2s on their offense. Would I prefer to take a clear wide receiver 1 alpha ahead of those guys? And I think he'll kind of ping pong back and forth a little bit around that area. I am going to go with another Fantasy Sanctuary favorite in Ramondre Stevenson here. Zeke Elliott is a free agent. Ramondre, the Patriots were very deliberate with how much they were using him. We heard in the offseason about how they didn't even want to overwork him in training camp because they wanted him to stay healthy. And then just started to look like he was putting it all together. I think he had a 100-yard game and then immediately got injured. And I just think that under a new sort of regime, there's going to be every opportunity for Ramondre to be a workhorse. I think that going into a contract year, he's going to be very motivated. And running backs, in particular, an area where I'll pay a little more attention to contract years than others because they tend to have the opportunity to be able to become really dominant. And yeah, I like Ramondre here.
Okay. I'm gonna follow up Ramondre with another Chiefs player because I just had to do it. And I'm going to go Rashee Rice here. He is one of my favorite prospects as in Dynasty, one of the pleasant surprises for me. I really was not too high on him. I kind of grabbed him in a few leagues, and I've been pretty rewarded. Now, he started off slow coming into the season. He kind of earned his role. I think he's probably Mahomes' trusted wide receiver in this offense outside of Travis Kelce. Now, this is a down year for the Chiefs, obviously. But I like what's going forward. I think he might be the wide receiver 1 next year, which is honestly, it's going to be a pleasant surprise. And he's got a ceiling to him. I mean, again, he's tied to Mahomes, and if they don't really, I don't think they have the cap room to really go out there and get like a premier guy like a T. Higgins. So if Rashee Rice, starts a season as the wide receiver 1, I'm okay with drafting him in the back of the 4th.
Okay, I will bring us home. I think this has been a really solid list. Couple people got snipes during this. Some bold picks. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes here. I just think it's crazy he's going at pick 40, right? Like that's a bit of a discount for the guy who's coming off a Super Bowl MVP. He did finish as QB8. I also put together like a little misleading stats that this guy's had the league high in drop percentage with his wide receivers. With average QB play, you could add an expected 50 to 70 points to his total, which would push him closer to the QB3, QB4 range. I don't want to be on the wrong side of history with a guy like Patrick Mahomes. I'm never going to overly fade him. And I hadn't picked a quarterback yet. So that's how I want to wrap up our mock draft. This has been a lot of fun, guys. I quickly want to call out a few of the spicy picks. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown at number 5 is something interesting. Like, totally agree with it, but these are just things to start thinking about 2024. Jonathan Taylor back as a top 10 pick in this. Deebo at pick 14. Kelce still going at pick 23. Barkley all the way down to pick 26 is not something I think people would have thought of 2 years ago. Dell at pick 33, a little bit spicy. And then again, to me, Mahomes at pick 40 is just crazy. The Super Bowl MVP falling that far down. So, there's, I think, as spicy as some of those picks are, the picks we didn't even pick, right? Alvin Kamara, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, like
Mark
these
Andrews.
are fantasy stalwarts. Yeah, Mark Andrews. So, really love one thing I'll just kind of say that I love that Tom said at the end there was like, if you're getting a wide receiver 2 in an offense, like what the hell are you doing at this early in the draft? I mean, me and my buddy Blake had some shouting matches on one of our earlier videos. We're high on T. Higgins, and I'm like, dude's not even wide receiver 1 in his own offense, and you're taking him at the second round turn. So love that. I think there was a lot of great synergy in how we look at building our teams and our evaluation around who's going to be the guys you want to build around. So we wish we could go all night and do the whole draft for you. But this is, I think, where the show must end. So we want to thank Tom and Rich for joining us again. This is going to be the best episode you see of the Fantasy Football Academy because of they were able to bring to the table. So we hope we've been able to provide you guys some value going into the 2024 season. Give these guys a follow. Like I said, follow them on their individual X pages because they put a lot of really good content out. And follow them on their YouTube because they are smoking us in terms of the quality and the amount of content that they are putting out. So I just want to say thanks again for joining us, guys. Any closing thoughts from the crew?
No, just thanks a lot for having us. It was really fun. I think, for me, I haven't started really looking at rankings or anything yet. So this was a really good exercise to kind of get my brain churning towards what I want my rankings to look like for this year. And yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on. Yeah, it was really enjoyable. Yeah, I'm not putting a redraft hat on for probably another 7 months. So yeah, thank you very much. It was good to get the brain ticking over.
Tom, Rich, it was a pleasure.
Had to force this one, right? I was like, we should do it. So I appreciate you guys being willing to. Okay. Well, take care, folks. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Take it easy.